or find how we were doing things. So that's where we first made contact. And a couple of years later, we're going to the weed management meetings. Here she was again, Mary Herr. And I knew she was involved in a project, but I didn't know much what kind of project, something to do about weeds. And when I was looking for a program on weeds and what to do about them and how to do something about them, the Calypsy person that I contacted referred me to Jutta Berger, referred me to Mary and said, you know, they're having a really neat program. It's a community effort. Why don't you contact her? And so I contacted Mary and I found out a little bit more, and I don't want to repeat it because that's her program. And she is here with the co-founder of that project, the Wildland Weed Warrior. I think you might have read about Mary and Omar in the announcement. And since we are running a little late, I'm going to skip that. And you can read that. Other than that, they're very dedicated to that program, working with the city of Santa Clarita. And while Mary has been an English teacher, Omar has been in the field of weeds and working for, let me see here, the Habitat of the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. So with no further ado, please welcome Mary and Omar.
Hello, can't see myself, but hopefully I'm in frame. My name's Omar Peña. My day job is habitat restoration with the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. I wanted to bring my passion and my experience to the Santa Clara River watershed. I approached the city to see if I can do a oak planting program because they're a keystone species for an oak woodland and chaparral. The idea was to plant the oaks and have the rest of the habitat kind of go around them. So as the oaks, you know, oak woodlands and woody chaparral take a long time to grow. So I figured I would start there. And as the oak trees are growing, we would clear the ground for invasives and bring in natives. And the city liked it enough that they brought in Mary as well. And then this is where we're at. So if you want to bring it, come on up.
All right, so I am Mary, the retired English teacher, which means I am not an expert, but I am passionate, I guess. And it started with a little thing in Tree People. I was trying to get this presenting. In July of 2018, there was a little notice that said that Tree People was planting trees out in the Angeles forest near my house. And so I wandered out because I like trees. But it turned out that they were doing something better than trees. They were putting native plants, chaparral plants, in the ground. And I'd been putting them in my yard. And I thought, wow, this is great. They're actually putting them out in the wild where they're like supposed to go. And that everything has kind of evolved since then. So here is our program. The city of Santa Clarita has been really nice about helping us. I don't think they totally understood what we were doing or why we were doing it, but they've been very supportive. And I'll explain how we met in a couple of slides. But one thing that helps us a lot is that the city has an avid volunteer program. And you can see an example of that in the slide right there. They offer all kinds of volunteer opportunities, and they have a big bash at the end to celebrate volunteers. And they get a lot of hours and things done in the city because of the volunteers, and all of that's wonderful. So they welcomed us and let us become one of those groups. We are volunteers. We don't work or represent the city in any way. We meet about 4 times a month, 2 weekends. We have 2 sites. So there's a Saturday at one site, a Sunday at another site. A lot of the volunteers are teens. And because we have a policy that you have to come with a parent if you're under 16, a lot of these teens bring their parents. And the teens want service hours. So it's sort of a set audience. It's kind of like our bread and butter. And it works really well during the school year. In the summer, things kind of dry up because the teens don't need hours anymore. But, you know, we move on anyway. Usually somebody wanders out. And then we got a grant from the city as well for tools and other things along the way. That's our mission statement. I had to write one. We had to write one in order to get the grant. Basically, it says we pull out invasive weeds, put in native plants, and hopefully improve the habitat that way. And definitely try to raise awareness with residents, because a lot of people don't understand that that yellow mustard that's so pretty on the hillside is actually an invasive plant. And that it needs to go because it's creating that monoculture, which is preventing biodiversity and the insects and the birds and on up the food chain. So we like to enlighten them with that information. How did we start? So I was doing YST, yellow star thistle, in one area, and Omar was planting his oaks, which is just explained, at another area. The YST, Gabi mentioned that I volunteer with California Invasive Plant Council. And there's a woman there who's been kind of like my mentor. And I mentioned, oh, I just saw this plant out there in this area. And she said, oh, it's YST. You have to go get it. You have to go get it. You have to go get it. So I dragged my husband out. I dragged my friend out. And it's July in 2021. And we're out there pulling these obviously spiny plants, and it's hot. And I thought, you know, this is dumb. I need some help. And I'd already volunteered with the trail building crew. So I knew that they were doing this kind of thing in the open spaces, and our open space administrator knew what Omar was doing. And so we sat down and had a meeting, and thus this was born. So these are our 2 main sites. Take the 14 going north, and it's sort of like 3 canyons in a row in a way. Ellesmere Canyon is down here. Is this going to work? And that was destined to be a landfill at one point until the city of Santa Clarita got involved. They weren't a city, I don't think, at that point, the late 1980s. But they managed to preserve it. And that may or may not have been the start of their buying up land around the city of Santa Clarita. They want to create a green belt around the city. So there's 12 to 13,000 acres that have been bought for open spaces. They primarily want that area for hiking trails, mountain bikers, horseback riders, recreation. But we were determined to improve those areas as much as we could. So Ellesmere Canyon is really pretty, and there's a waterfall at the end. There's a Newhall Park and Ride right there. On the next canyon over sort of is Whitney Canyon, which you might have heard of. It's the more popular one. And it ends in a waterfall as well. And then you go north a little bit and you hit Placerita Canyon Road and come to Golden Valley Ranch Open Space, and also East Walker Ranch Open Space. We're just a little bit past the Placerita Canyon Nature Center. So those are the 2 areas that we work. This is what it looks like on the ground. So on the left is Ellesmere. We were just starting in 2023. And if you look at the fence railing there and the mulch, and then 2 steps past that is the parking lot. And the freeway runs right by there. So it's hard to talk sometimes because that freeway is right there. So this is really the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, because on the other side is the Angeles National Forest. So we're kind of in this buffer zone between urban and the wildlands. Golden Valley's on the other side. That's the parking lot's the trailhead. That's the point at which Omar was starting to build the Oak Trail up it follows the trail right there. And that's about a year after we started. So trying to do some early detection, rapid response, which is going out and finding a smaller population of weeds and trying to remove them before they become a big population of weeds. So we've dabbled in that. One of the places we dabbled was at Haskell Canyon Open Space for Saharan mustard. Another form of mustard, there are many. And my husband and I were hiking and we saw this beautiful field of flowers, which you can see in the middle right there. And then it's kind of on a ridge, so it's real steep on either side. But then mixed in was the Saharan mustard. So we did about 3 trips up there with volunteers who bravely marched up a really steep hill, which is dangerous going up and dangerous going down. So our bags were about half full when we carried them down so that nobody slipped. I went out there this morning because it was about time to find out whether we were successful or not. And there was good news and there was bad news. The good news is I really didn't see any Saharan mustard. I saw maybe 20 plants, which I yanked out quickly and carried back down the hill. The bad news is I didn't see the wildflowers. I saw grasses, bromus grasses, oats grasses. So if somebody has an idea of why this happened, I don't know, but a little disappointed in that regard. But the Saharan mustard was gone, I think, pretty much. So that was successful. It won't spread around to other areas quite as much. We just did this about a month ago over by the 5 freeway on the other side of Santa Clarita, and it was fun. We took out some tree tobacco. That big tree in the middle was the one that I saw first, but then as you walk along, you find about 50 smaller plants, right? They just grow. They look kind of cute there in the left picture. So we pulled those out and we had this one volunteer and his son, man, he could leap over tall buildings. He leaped over the creek. I said, yeah, I think there's some more plants on the other side of the creek. He was gone for 40 minutes. We just didn't see him. And when he came back, he said, oh yeah, I took care of all of that. So I'm hoping that is true. I need to go back and find out, but volunteers are wonderful as far as I'm concerned. Other volunteers sawed out that tree and then pushed it over. And then we discovered with 2 other trees, it was better to just dig out the roots and then push the tree over. So we did that. And we left one of the trees lying across the beginnings of a social trail, but there was like a little oak nursery going in there. And I was afraid that if people walked down that social trail, they would step on the little oaks. But there's big oak, and then there were several baby oaks around there. So we'll go back and see if we actually did get rid of it. It seemed to be pretty contained right by the creek right there. So this is where Omar's oaks are, Golden Valley. That's what it looked like from the hill up above. That haze is all mustard, black mustard, dead black mustard stalks. So we spent some time taking it out, created a huge pile that the city was supposed to pick up and didn't for about a year, but that was kind of like good mulch. There was nothing growing underneath it when they took it away. And a bunch of bags, and that's what it looks like when you don't have that haze of black mustard. So now you kind of have a clean palette in order to think, okay, what should we put there? And so we put things in, and that's less than 2 years later. You can see a lot of tall bushes. One of the buckwheats that was already there, kind of, I think that little thing in the front right there, kind of grew, and then we added some chaparral mallow, some purple sage, some more buckwheat, some yuccas, and longstem buckwheat. Anyway, a bunch of things, and so things are looking better at that point. You'll see a picture anyway. So we felt like there was success. I didn't know if anybody wanted to know what we planted, but that's what we planted. We got our first batch of plants from California Botanic Gardens in February 2022. 30 of those 40 plants were still there and doing quite well by June of 2023. So that was the last time I actually counted plants. So in June of 2023, this is what was out there. The Xerces Society, which I have since become more involved in, gives out habitat kits. You can apply for it, and they'll be happy to send you a bunch of free plants, which is quite nice. The only thing that didn't work well this year, you'll notice that only 30 of the 56 we got survived, was they ended up with a nursery that had a great reputation, but I think they went through an ownership change or management change. So the plants that we got were very small and lightly rooted, just like 1 or 2 little white roots, a couple inches long. But we got 8 milkweed out of it, and that milkweed brought out monarch caterpillars. So it was really a success. We've dabbled in homegrown stuff. We've tried some cuttings. If anybody has advice on cottonwood cuttings, there is a cottonwood out there. We'd like to add more. Come give us some advice. And volunteers. That long stem buckwheat, Eriogonum elegant, seeds like crazy. Okay. So we've got about 20 little baby buckwheat plants out there right now that we flagged so that nobody comes by and takes them away. At that point, there were 80 plants, 17 different species, a whole lot more biodiversity than a field of mustard. So we were feeling pretty good about that. So we started at another place, Ellesmere, where the yellow star thistle is. We put in 20 plants, 15 were doing well a couple months later. The picture is from December 2023, where we planted some more. This last season, we went back to Xerces Society. This time we got 93 plants with longer roots, and it included woolly pod milkweed, which I didn't really have any familiarity with, and I don't put it out. I'm hoping that it will get established out there because we need more types of milkweed other than just the narrow leaf. We did the homegrown plant thing again, and you can see one of the monarch caterpillars that was on milkweeds that we got from Xerces. So that was another bit of a success. For the homegrown plants, I feel like I need to say something about sanitizing. You can't just like go to Theodore Payne and get plants, especially if you're any near the wildlands. They store their plants, they get them from a lot of nurseries and they store their plants in the ground. So there is a potential for pathogens. Some oak death started up in Northern California that way. Somebody took a nursery plant out in the wildlands. And because it's wetter and it's a water pathogen, I don't know, thousands of oaks have died because of that. So you just have to kind of be aware of that. When we do the homegrown stuff, we sterilize the pots. We buy bagged, commercially bagged soil that hasn't been opened and stored anywhere. We water, don't keep any of the pots on the ground, and we water so that there's always air underneath the pots. Some people tell me I worry too much, but I would hate to be responsible for causing problems like that. So I'm going to get out of the homegrown plant business and just go buy them at CalBG. All right, so weeds. Originally, we were supposed to talk about weeds, but I'm not an expert. Omar's more of an expert, but I have the time to put the PowerPoint together because he's working full time and I retired. So this is, anyway, a definition of an invasive plant. It's pretty standard. I tend to go to Zoom meetings and take screenshots, which is what a lot of these are. So unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly who said these things, which is probably not a great thing, but I could, anyway, that's what I have. The definition of invasive plant, I think, is pretty standard. It's non-native to the ecosystem, so it comes in predator-free, nothing to contain it. And then the introduction is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. So we don't deal with the economic harm so much, except for preventing fires, hopefully by taking out the flammable things. But we do want to improve environmental health along the way and improve biodiversity. So there's another screenshot just to prove that indeed those grasses that are not native are highly flammable. It came out 3 times more ignitable than even the native grasses, the stipes, which are in pink right there. So just in case you didn't realize that these non-native weeds can be flammable, they can. So this is another reason to plant native plants. You get animals, creatures. So this is just a few of the things that we found out there. I found this article, Small Plots of Native Plants Boost Insects in Urban Settings. That was in Melbourne, Australia. And they took an area in the middle of concrete buildings that had been grass and a couple of trees, and they put in native plants. And sure enough, if you build it, they will come. So I like that article because that's what we're doing. We're taking out weeds and putting in native plants. So hopefully if we build it, they will come. That bee right there is a crotch's bumblebee, which is one of 4 of 25 native bumblebees in California that are endangered. So it's one of those species that is declining. A volunteer pulled that out of a water bucket and put it on a buckwheat. And while it was still dried off and holding still, I took a picture. I didn't know that it was the crotch's bumblebee, the endangered one, but somebody on iNaturalist told me that. And then we just went through the process of confirming that. So that little bee right there has become my mascot. You know, we need to have more of these out there when we are planting. But weeds do grow. So this is about last year at Golden Valley. We put in the little sign because we got the kits from Xerxes, and obviously you can barely see it. But on the right side, volunteers spent a few hours out there and they cleared out a section. We put some poppy plants around the sign, thought they looked pretty, and they have bloomed. So we have orange flowers around there. So the weeds grow, the weeds go down, and hopefully the good stuff, the native plants flourish once the weeds are gone. I don't know if I'll go through all this or not. These are some more screenshots. The chart I find hopeful because it reminds you that sometimes you don't have to do a lot of work. In the where it says low and absent to low, if you've got low burn severity, which usually means you've got a high number of natives and not too many weeds, maybe you don't have to do anything, or maybe you just go out and pull a few of the weeds and it will recover. In our two areas, I think we're at the other end of the chart. We've had high burn severity because both of the sites have burned. There aren't that many native plants where we're planting, and there's a high weed infestation. So we do need to go out and cut down the weeds and put the natives in as well. The yellow box at the bottom was advice given to me from Calipsy. If you've got a big infestation, and I'll show you an example, you need to start at the outside and work toward the center, right? That's logical. If you start in the middle, then it's still spreading. And then you also need to get the small isolated populations before they expand. So an example of that is the yellow star thistle at Ellesmere, where we were. So the bottom photo where it's nice and bare was July 2021, and there was a fire there in that area and a drought. So by July 2021, I was out there, and there weren't that many yellow star thistle plants. But give it a couple of years and rain, and you end up with this right here, which is a field of yellow star thistle. So it's boxed in by the freeway, by a parking lot, by the site that we're working on, and then by the Angeles forest, basically. So it's kind of boxed in. I've obsessed about this for years, even trying to get somebody to come out with a beetle, a biocontrol, to come out and use that as a test site, just in case that would work. But we haven't succeeded in doing anything. So back to the advice where you start on the outside. So we'll keep picking at the perimeter, and we will and have gone into the canyons, Ellesmere Canyon, and pulled off along the sides. The further you go into a canyon, the fewer weeds you tend to see. So most of these weeds are going to be at the beginning. So there is some YST right there. I was out there the other day. So we'll go out and we'll pull that to keep it from spreading into the canyon. Hitting the small isolated populations before they expand. This is, isn't that pretty? All that mustard there along the trail. And, you know, volunteers were kind of upset when I said, okay, we're going to take it all out. But we did. And we took it out. This is Ellesmere Canyon. If you go up this hill and then down the hill, you go into that canyon. So anyway.
When you remove the mustard, are you pulling it or cutting it?
We chop it out. During the winter, it's great because you can pull it out and you can get roots like this when it's nice and damp and wet. But then the ground hardens. So we have choppers, which I have a slide that we chop for the most part. And I think if you get like an inch or so, half an inch below ground, that usually does it. There's another group that works in the Sepulveda Basin, and they have these rice knives, which we have used sometimes to like saw an inch or so below the ground. So, and we've got the third partner in our group. His nickname is Slack, and his real name is Bill Rogers, but he goes by Slack. But he has taken it. It's his mission in life to find every mustard rosette plant out there and take it out. So I think he single-handedly removed all of the mustard at Golden Valley. So Gabi was interested in the difference between yellow star thistle and tocolote. Maybe Omar can speak more about this. I just look at how long the wings, the leaves are on the side. That tells me it's YST, and the purple tells me it's tocolote. Those are not great. They're both not great weeds, so they could go regardless, even though they look alike. If you would like more information, this site right here, BLM, can talk about it. Do you want to say? Okay. I guess you guys have more tocolote out here than YST. So that's good. There is a YST plant back there, right? Because I saw the leaves that create the wings. Yeah. So those are my two pinpoints. I'm not a scientist, so strictly I look for key things.
There's
Yes.
a question in the chat. Does disturbing the soil by pulling increase the potential for more weeds the following season? If you would be so kind as to repeat the question for the people online.
Question from chat. Does pulling the weeds create more disturbance, which leads to more weeds in the end next year? I have heard that and I've worried about it. And I just decided recently, based on our experience, that get the weeds out with minimal disturbance. But I mean, some volunteers go out there and they're going to get that weed, right? And so they dig and dig and dig and dig. That's probably too much disturbance. But chopping out the mustard plant with the hand tool that we have creates some disturbance, but I don't think it leads to more. There's that balance. I used to worry about that more, but I don't anymore.
I mean, we have a big volunteer group, so it's basically seed bank management, right, for any weed. So like, if we continually go out there every weekend with a lot of hands and there is disturbance, you just keep getting it and eventually we'll get exhausted. So we know that, mustard potentially lasts 60 years. Mustard seed has been known to last 60 years. But if you keep flushing it and you keep visiting it systematically, you will eventually exhaust it. So if you just continuously have those people going out there and pulling, will eventually be exhausted.
And if you have a guy named Slack.
When you
So-
say chop, are you still leaving sometimes roots in the ground just because?
Yeah, but I don't think it comes back.
Matter for animals.
Yeah. And there's another question.
Visiting some pristine areas on my travels, I've learned a lot about biodecontamination. Do you talk to your volunteers and people about like checking your zippers, checking your pockets, checking your shoes?
And repeat the question.
Yes, repeating the question, biodecontamination. So in other words, you're out in the field of weeds. When you leave that field of weeds, brush yourself off and that's what you're talking about? Yeah. When we remember. So we're on that wildland urban interface. So we're not out in pristine areas. So if they take it to the parking lot, I don't worry too terribly much, but yeah, we've thought about that.
Do you use any mechanical means or is it all hand?
We use a hedge trimmer, which I will show you.
You don't
So
have any like tractor like that?
no, the question was, do we use other mechanical means like tractors? No, our site right now is really small. To get that field of YST, this one right here, that would be great. But we don't have
The
that.
hope is to eventually, recruit the city maybe to do the stuff. We've been putting bugs in their ears to like maybe come out and do this patch of YST with mechanization. The verdict is out. So
Yeah. So as I said, I'm obsessed about this patch and just have to pick your battles as you go. All right, so the biocontrol, I just thought this was interesting. I took apart a YST seed head and a little larva popped out. So then I had to find out what it was. It turned out it was a peacock fly or a false peacock fly. They've been imported to try to cut down on the YST population. It hasn't worked very well. So now they're trying to come in with a new rosette weevil. And the adults feed on the rosette leaves and the upper root. So it's kind of like attacking the plant from the top and the bottom. So
Who's they?
that's a really good question. I I don't, California Department of Agriculture is probably leading that along with some other groups. I tried to get our site to become a test site through a professor at Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara. So, but anyway, I think last time I read, the rosette weevil has been applied at 3 sites in California. So it's still in the testing phase.
I think our site wasn't big enough.
Is that, I heard that they ran out of weevils.
Oh, okay.
So, yes.
You're kind of the early stages of this process. Just wondering if you've learned, from people who maybe been at this for 10 or 15 or 20 years. Do you reach a point where you push the invasives out and establish the natives and it's self-regulating at that point?
That is my hope. And the question was, do you ever reach a point where the weeds are gone and the natives have taken over? I've heard about 5 years. That can happen after about 5 years. 5 years, you walk away. Again, this chart right here can kind of help you, how bad is the problem? How long is it going to take? And I think putting the native plants back in, revegetation is really key.
We've seen
To help in
tree
that.
people.
To that,
San Francisco, right? Tree people.
Yeah.
We've seen that where they don't. So we've seen other examples of other nonprofits called Tree People where we both kind of got our teeth cut. And they have an area up San Francisco and they've been planting in there. And as they slowly move up the ridge, they don't revisit the areas where they first started. So it is a science. And if you attack this systematically, you can eventually move the line of weeds to one area. You just have to do it systematically.
yeah. I think a lot of plants have chemicals in their roots that discourage other plants, and native plants do that as well. So my hope anyway is you get enough of the native plant roots out there that eventually the weeds won't bother anymore. But you're right, we're early in on this. It's 2.5, 3 years. So we'll see. Yep.
Then from the other side of planting, I'm a complete newbie, so when you're planting, do you pick seasonal times like spring to plant when there's the growing season, if you will, or do you hover over the plants and water them, or are they in the ground and they're on their own at that point?
Yes. So the question is, how do we care for the plants once they're in the ground? So we plant and then we water. So I'll describe the watering system here in a minute. We used Omar's Jeep with a 100-gallon water tank on it for a while. So the watering the first year is most important. And so we try to get out there every 2 weeks for the new plants to give them three gallons or so of water. And we use buckets to cart the water to them. Yep.
Any time in the fall or
Anyway.
time of year that you plant?
Yeah, we planted as late as February. Our first planting, the one that got 30 of the 40 plants to be successful, was in February. So I think if you continue to water, you can stretch that planting season a little bit. But we usually do start in October, November planting to
So-
catch the rains.
Yeah, so we
So-
do hover for a year. Yeah, so we do try to establish it for a year. So we water for a year, remove the weeds, and then by that time, by the next rain, it waters them and they should be, cross your fingers, should be established and going.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the older plants we stop watering. And question.
Good question. What happens if you're off the schedule? Like, if you pull now and think, okay, I've made an open space, I'll put a new native plant in. Is it worth it to try at any time of year if you're off the calendar? Timing is bad. The question.
Yeah, is it is it good to go off the calendar? Is it okay to go?
No, say you get inspired and you start pulling weeds now, would you go ahead and try some plants? You would just wait.
Yeah. I think there is a point where it's just too hot to start planting. So you have to judge the weather and decide, right now we're getting rain. So maybe it would be okay to put another plant in right now. but definitely not in June or July, even with watering. I don't, yeah. So. This is our other big problem at Ellesmere Canyon.
Okay, there's a question in the chat. Do you have issues with grasses, especially brome and schismus, that you're trying to address? The photos of some of the areas you're showing seem like they may have some invasive grasses perhaps, which is.
Do we have issues with invasive grasses? Yes, we do. And we were just out at Golden Valley with our hedge trimmer trying to get the grasses, because I read someplace that if you trim the grasses to the ground at the right time of year, the seed heads are already coming up, but they haven't gone to the point where they're going to replicate. So I guess the plant is putting all of the energy into the seed head. So if you chop it down at that point, the grass isn't going to grow back. That's a theory.
There's also a theory with grasses. I normally use herbicide, grass-specific herbicide, but we're not able to do it on this site. The theory is grasses usually can produce seed for 4 years. So if you keep hitting it mechanically for 4 years, in theory, you could get rid of most bromes. Obviously, there's a buffer between years, but that's a pro tip. So
Cool. And so this is an interesting discussion now, because harding grass is at our Ellesmere site, and you can see that wall. It's a clump grass, and then it shoots up tall stalks and with a lot of weeds. So you can see that wall in the picture on the left, or whatever. And then, so we took the hedge trimmer and chopped off the tall stalks, and then Bill Neal, who likes to volunteer his time, and we very much appreciate this, came out with a grass-specific herbicide and a backpack sprayer. And so he has sprayed all those clumps that you can see in the photo where it's been chopped off. So we're hoping that it will kill the harding grass so we can continue to plant across the hillside. Yes, and Bill Neal is in the room with us if there are any questions. Was I supposed to? No questions yet, but he is available for questions. And I know he's done some work for this chapter as well, and done some weed stuff out there. The harding grass, I didn't know what it was, but in 2020, after the fire, I went out there and found a YST. It was clumps of burned, charred stalks, just about an inch above the ground, black, clumps all over the place, and I didn't know what it was. So fire didn't kill it. We've tried trimming it, like Omar talked about with the bromes and stuff, and it wouldn't go away. So, and it doesn't dig out. The roots are quite deep and spreading. So it seemed like herbicide was about the only way that we were going to get rid of it. So, speaking of weeds and spreading the weeds, the biocontamination. So I just like this picture, the one with my pant hem right there. This is fillery, very common weed out there. And you probably know that the seed heads jump out and drill into the ground. Drilled into my pant leg, into the hem. So weeds are, they want to spread. And so yes, we probably should brush off more than we do when we're out there. Our planting process, again, kind of honed from our experience with tree people, but there are only certain ways that you can plant. Dig the hole. We put the hole in a tarp because then you can scoot the tarp around. We build berms around it, and we come in with the water and get down real low when we water. Those little white tree tubes we kind of ran out of the middle cages, and I wanted to mark where the woolly pod milkweed is, but it's dormant, so there's not really anything in there. I've also tried to use them for protection against frost, which the jury's still on that. It didn't hurt. I just don't know if it helped enough. But that's why those little white tubes are there, the tree tubes. We also use gopher cages. We do have gophers, and I just discovered that one plant just disappeared the other day, this week. And that's what happens sometimes. So Volking is the place that we bought big rolls of this. You just cut off a length of the cage that you want. You have to twist one end, and then that goes over the roots of the cage of the plant. Watering. So I mentioned that to get the water filled, we had Omar's Jeep with 100-gallon tank, but he got busy with life, full-time job and all that stuff. So a temporary replacement, or the best we could do at the time, was to buy this bladder, the one in the middle, 62, 63 gallons. It fits in the back of my Subaru. So luckily the city next to Golden Valley has a water spigot that we're allowed to use. So I drive over there, fill up the bladder, drive back. Gravity is helpful under these situations. So you try to park so that, you know, the water will come out rather quickly. But the city, you know, built us a water tank. So the 1,500 gallon water tank on a hillside at Ellesmere. So when I say the city has been supportive, the city's been supportive, which is great, between providing for the volunteer process so people can sign up, and then tools and this. Yeah, it's been really nice.
Why are they supportive?
The question is, why are they supportive?
Sorry.
I don't know. Like I said, when we had our first meeting, the gentleman who runs the open spaces kind of looked, you know, really, people are going to come out and read? But people do. And what they really like to do is plant. So, you know, we try to extend our planting season because you plant, but you got to weed before you can plant, because the two things go together. We spend a lot of time on education. So volunteers keep signing up. We can never really take more than 20 at a time. There just isn't that much work to do. And we've had some returnees come up. When I was a volunteer, I liked to get knowledge. I like to meet people. I like to be out in nature, and I like to feel like I did a good job. So we try to provide all of that for people. And hopefully that is one of the reasons that people keep coming out. So I guess that's why the city supports us. The tools, the hand tiller is our all-purpose chopping tool. And that's what we use to take out, chop the bustard out. The cages, I think I've already talked about. So we went to this, I went to the city and I said, I've never used one before, but could we have a string trimmer? And I think they thought I would hurt myself or somebody else using a string, since I've never used one before. Omar's used them a lot, but he's not always out there. So it gave us a hedge trimmer instead, because their trail building crew have found it quite useful. It's not bad. You can see all that slack, and you can see all of the grass that he's taken down to the ground right there. The only bad part is it's heavier than a string trimmer, but it is safer, and you can get in closer to the plants that way, and it does a decent job. It works really well on milk thistle and Italian thistle, the bigger, thicker plants. It works the least best. Can I say that, on grasses, because the grass is kind of bent over, but it does work successfully. So we dabbled in solarization, which did work. I'd like to do some more. I just don't know where. That's Golden Valley. On the left, you can see the Golden Hills, which are basically, were run by cattle, I think, and then grazed and then fire. Anyway, somebody thought that those invasive grasses that are brown in the summer should call it Golden Valley, and that will make it better. We put poppies in there, but you know, it worked. And so that's it. You can see one of our plants with the gopher cage sticking out and the cage over it, and a toy on that's doing pretty well. Volunteers like to find rocks. I don't think it's a bad thing to put them around the plants, because native plants like to put their roots underneath. And I've never had a bad day out there. So it just keep going back, you know. And websites that I personally have found useful, SantaClaritaVolunteers.com is down there. You're welcome to come out, make the 50-minute drive out our way if you would like. You have to sign up for the city first. They're very, very diligent about that, liability and stuff like that. But that's it. And we have a question.
One more question in the chat. Yvonne asked, actually, let me come up and read this in here so that people see. So Yvonne writes, she's not been successful using Fusillade grass-specific herbicide on brome or schismus. Any recommendations for other grass-specific herbicides? I hesitate to use Roundup for several reasons, but I'm starting to feel like it might be necessary. We have 6 acres in the Mojave Desert and are surrounded by properties that are overrun by weeds. So,
So the fusillade has not been successful, is the question?
yes,
Usually we've been pretty successful at a rate of 0.75 ounces per gallon. That knocks down schismus and almost every grass, obviously besides bunch grasses, and it does not affect Volpia myaros or Festuca myaros is I think the new name. I can't keep track. It does not affect that. So we've seen too that when we remove bromes, those guys move in or the Volpia moves in. So we're trying to change our tactics, maybe hitting it with the weed whacker for a few days. I mean, for a few growing years. But yeah, that we've been successful with that rate. So maybe bump your rate up. 0.75 ounces per gallon. Very little. I mean, it's very expensive. If you buy fusillade in the squeeze and pour, it's very expensive. I recommend maybe getting it. Well, I don't know if you'd be using a gallon, but if you have several acres in the Mojave, then you can buy a gallon for the same price as a 32 ounce at a store. So, yeah. Any other questions on the program?
Then thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much. And I was asking Mary and Omar if they would be willing to lead a field trip to that area. And